But also, I've been practicing talking because I've been really amused by how my voice sounds. I'm not
Well, you
sure.
sound like shit.
Yeah, so what you should do while you're doing your voice acting training is if they need you to play like a Butchie Joel type character is just go get real sick first, and then you'll have these deep tones that you can just access while you're dying.
I can do Joel. Scoot,
It was pretty good.
Ellie. Scoot, Ellie.
Welcome to RPG Book Club Shortcast, the podcast where we play a big bit of a little video game and talk about how it makes us feel. I am Sam Allman.
I'm
Maddy
David Bernard Hauk.
Oh, and I'm Maddy Grace Weapon.
I go second on Book Club No Kiseki, so I would second there. But you go second on the main podcast.
It's fine.
So there's a conflict.
Well, no, I go after Eli. Since Eli's not here, I instinctively was like, I go second because Bernard's the guest. But I guess you're the guest here, but you're really not the guest anymore because you're permanently on Kiseki, so whatever.
Yeah, I think it worked good for y'all to say to the exact same time, so just do that from now on.
I'm
Okay.
David Bernard Hauk.
I'm Maddy Grace Weapon.
No, you're not.
And today we will be finishing our discussion of The Last of Us Part 1, which will cover the fall, winter, and spring chapters of the game. But before we start that, so along the lines of Ellie collecting comic books in the back half of the game, what is something that in the apocalypse where material frivolities have absolutely no value, you would still go out of your way to collect?
Well, just like my man Bill, porn.
Just like my man Big Boss in Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, I don't know, cassette tapes of 80s music.
Now, if I did see a cassette tape of Laura Branigan's Gloria, I would definitely pick it up.
Welcome to Book Club No Cassette Take.
Yeah, I am
Gloria
not.
is Laura Branigan. I pulled the right name for that, right?
I don't actually know.
Yes, Laura Branigan. I just checked.
I am not a vinyl person in my real life, but I think in an apocalypse setting, I would do vinyl because I feel that's the only way to discover music in a world where nobody gives a shit about music anymore.
True, although counterpoint, if you're in a post-apocalyptic world, I think you're a lot less likely to find an intact vinyl than a cassette tape, and also a lot less likely to be able to play it.
Well, I figured that you'd be with vinyl. There's I could see a hurdy-gurdy hand crank version of a phonograph to that you could rig up without electricity, and you couldn't really do that.
That's actually a good point. Yeah, cassette tape, you say you have a little player. You need batteries or something.
Yeah, and so that's why I was thinking vinyl instead of.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
Instead of other stuff. But, yeah.
I would collect Funko Pops.
I might, because they'd be everywhere. Because,
look, I'm anti-Funko, but in this fantastical situation in which the world has ended, I probably would actually collect Funko Pops because they wouldn't cost anything.
They could very well become the currency after society collapses.
Yeah, instead of bottle caps, it's Funko Pops.
Yes.
So
I'll trade you 2 Funko Pops for a roll of toilet paper.
So yeah, on that note, because being shortcast, it's supposed to be evergreen, even though we're recording these in lieu of regular episodes. I figured that would be a fun little thematic thing to do.
Did we not do How Was Your Week last week?
We did not. We talked about how the game, how the creation of the game instead.
Okay, cool. I mean, that's fine. It makes sense to not do it, but I thought we did do it last week, so I was like, well, that's not consistent. But I'm misremembering. There we go.
There we are. So without further ado, let's listen to some Last of Us music and then get to talking about this game. Okay, so smash cut to fall. So we are not in Pittsburgh anymore, and we're not even in the eastern part of the United States at all anymore.
Thank God.
We are in Jackson County, Wyoming, which is a super pretty area. Like, I love post-apocalyptic cities as much as the next guy, but like the apocalypse out in nature is the good shit, where everything's just overgrown and it's good. I really like it.
This whole back half of the game has a very, very different vibe than the front half, both aesthetically, narratively, pacing, mechanically, especially vibe-wise, and a big part of it is that most of it takes place in wide open nature areas.
Yeah, and it's real good. So we make our way across this dam, like a water dam, and on the other side of it, we come up to this seemingly abandoned old. It's FEMA, but they call it FEDRA in the game, like this FEMA quarantine area. But when we try to get through, people pop out with guns, and they tell us to stand down. And in one of his last shows of restraint in the entire game, Joel backs down and talks to them instead of shooting first. And then out of the gate comes Tommy, who's like, "Hey, I know him. He's my brother. Like, you can trust him." So Tommy introduces us to his wife, Maria, who like is in charge of the settlement there. She welcomes us in, and Tommy goes to show Joel around. They're working on bringing the dam's power plant back online so that they'll have electricity there and in the nearby town that they have up and running. They have like 20 families there, Tommy says. They also have horses there, and we find out that Ellie knows how to ride horses, which comes into play here in a second. So Joel leaves Ellie with Maria and goes with Tommy to help them get the turbines back going. And so while they're alone, Tommy hands Joel a picture of Sarah, and Joel is like, "Nope, I'm good," and gives it back to him. And
I don't need this.
Yeah.
You can keep this. I don't remember his exact lines, but I just enjoy impersonating Joel while I have this voice.
Yeah, and
it's really more of an Arthur Morgan voice I'm doing, but anyway,
it works. So, so Tommy takes the picture back and is like, "Well, I'll still hold on to it for you. Hold on to it for you later." And so then you continue your tour, and they get the turbine up and running, and so the place powers back up. It's a big, exciting, we might actually survive this part, and it's really cool. So Tommy and Joel go into a room so they can talk privately, and Joel tells him that Ellie is immune. Tommy is like, why are you telling me this? Like, what do you want me to do? And Joel, I'm expecting him to be like, "I need you to help us talk to the Fireflies and like be a liaison." But instead he says, "The Fireflies are your people, so you can take this kid off my hands and you can go and finish the journey with Ellie, and I don't want to deal with it anymore." And Tommy is like, fuck no. I have a family of my own and 20 families in town to take care of. You can take her to the Fireflies." And Joel's like, "You owe me this, you owe me this." And while they're discussing the finer points of abandoning Ellie, some bandits show up to attack the place. So Tommy and Joel take down the bandits.
I want to note, this is our first fight of this chapter. It's been like 30 minutes.
Yeah,
since the start of the fall chapter. This game, or summer, this back half of the game really starts to push the boundaries of how long you can just do either cutscenes or exploring or walk and talk before actual action happens. It's dope.
I think there aren't even any like clickers or runners or anything during the exploration scenes. If there are, there's
none at all.
Okay. So after you take him out, Tommy tells Maria about Ellie, and Maria's like, Tommy, don't go. But Tommy has had a change of heart. He's like, I have to. This is the whole world we're talking about. It's bigger than Jackson. Like, this is our chance. And Joel is like, okay, well, I'm going to go talk to Ellie and let her know that I'm abandoning her despite her biggest fear being left alone. But of course, Ellie has already left. She knew what was up, and she stole a horse and has run off into the forest. So
as teen girls do.
Yeah.
Teen girls always be stealing horses.
Which
you can't
teen
leave
girl
a horse. You can't leave a horse around a teen girl.
Especially when you're fucking up her emotions.
That's right.
So Tommy and Joel chase after her, and they fight a bunch of bandits along the way. She's holed up in a really gorgeous house. Like, we walked in and someone was like, "Oh my god, we could live here!" Like, it's a really nice house. So
very well preserved.
It like, compared to everything else, it really is. Like, most of the time you walk in and half the walls are collapsed. This one was just a nice little peaceful Wyoming farmhouse. You find her upstairs and she's reading some teenage girl's diary, and she's like, is this really all that people cared about before, is like boys and what to wear? And Joel's like, yeah. And then there's a heartbreaking scene where Ellie tells him that she's disappointed in him, and he's like, yeah, but I trust Tommy more than I trust myself. He'll be able to help you way more than I could. She's like, that's not the point. I'll be terrified if I'm without you. And she's like, I'm not Sarah. You don't have to worry about losing me. And Joel looks her dead in the face and says, you're right. You're not my daughter, and I sure as hell ain't your dad, and we're going to go our separate ways. At that point, the bandits show up to attack us, so I walk Joel out into the middle of line of fire, and I set down my controller so that he dies in at least one of the timelines, because fuck this guy.
This is funny enough, this is a very minor critique of this game. This is actually the second time in this is the second time in this chapter that a emotionally intense conversation has been ended by a battle happening. And, that's something that you can do if you don't want to write how to end the conversation. It makes sense. I mean, it's a nice way to punctuate emotions. It's a nice way for things to be unresolved, which is a nice way it's for some narrative expediency. And it is a video game, so it makes emotional sense for dramatic tension to lead to battles. But it was funny that these two scenes happened like within half an hour of each other.
Yeah.
The other one, for the record, was when Joel and
Tommy were yelling at each other.
The first battle of the entire chapter was that battle also interrupted them in the middle of an argument. So the first time I didn't notice, but the second time I was like, wait a second.
You can't keep doing this.
Yeah.
It is still a video game.
So after we respawn and then fight off the bandits, Ellie agrees to go back with Joel, but she's not happy about it. And they all ride their horses back to town, but they stop before going all the way in. And Joel's like, Ellie, get off your horse, get on mine. We got a long way to go. Apparently had a change of heart, and in proper Joel fashion didn't say anything about it because he can't talk about his emotions.
To be clear, in my opinion, the whole change of heart thing over that period of time works. What you were saying, it makes it sound like it doesn't work, but I want to say I think it does work.
Yeah, like playing through it, I got it when it happened. In the movie cut that I was using for my for my notes, it really feels like where he's like, nah, fuck you. Pew, pew. Never mind. Because it's like an extended bandit thing, and like Ellie gets in danger at parts of it and things like that. So like it makes sense that he has the change of heart.
The gameplay parts are important to narrative.
The back half of this game, I realized one of the notes, and I might talk about this a little bit more later in detail. A big thing in the back half of this game is characters undergoing character development internally while you're shooting zombies. Not just Joel, also Ellie, and maybe even other characters. It is simply implied that literally, you know, you go to work, and I can tell you some of my best thinking happens when I'm at my night shift, right? I go to work, I clock in, I start doing right there. I start doing the moves along with the main character. It's Riddick. But yeah, and then 5 hours later, I'm like, man, I got some good thinking done during work today, right? And it's kind of the same thing, except much more dangerous and violent. What they're doing here. There's like every. Like, Joel does a good thunk here. You're gonna have Ellie doing a good thunk later. It's really neat.
Yeah,
killing people and zombies is Joel's job. So
there you go. He's clocking in for a shift at the zombie shooting factory.
Yeah. So, Tommy tells Joel that the Fireflies are at the University of Eastern Colorado, I think. And we're like, cool, thanks. That's where they head off. So when they get to Colorado, there are a shit ton of infected around, but they're all like, maybe it's like Bill, how he was using the infected as a defense, maybe. But the closer you get to it, the more obvious it is that they're all gone. So when you make it up to the lab, there's a dude with an audio log saying that a dead dude with an audio log, and the log says that the Fireflies all left. Most of them disbanded. The few that are still trying to make a cure have left to Salt Lake City. And so Joel and Ellie are like, our quest updated. Now we're headed to Salt Lake City. But then some bandits show up, and they definitely 100% shoot first. Like, Ellie is like, oh, hey, who's that? Is it a Firefly? And the bandits attack first. This becomes important.
Also, I want to note an interesting structural thing. We have just explored our way through an environment, and now we're fighting our way backwards through the same environment. It's something that I don't think this game really does elsewhere, at least not to this extent, but it is really neat.
That's actually
having
true.
This environment work both ways.
That's a very common, not a very common, that is not a common, but a very, very good video game design trick that some games I like a whole lot do. Metal Gear Solid 3, for example, does it extremely well in a few moments. But yeah, you're right. This game, I don't think up until this point has done that, because it's all about that. It's all about that forward motion. I mean, how often in this game do you go to a place and then leave it, right? Instead of going to a place and then progressing on to the next place. Most of the levels are straight lines. But yeah, I didn't notice that. Very astute.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, on your way down, Joel makes sure to kill each and every single one of them that are there. But as they're like most of the way down, Joel is scuffling with one of them, and they fall off of a balcony, and Joel lands on a piece of rebar that goes straight through him. It's rough.
It's nasty.
Yep. My man got owned.
He got. So Ellie helps him up, and then you have a super tense set piece where Joel is basically immobile and dying, but you're still controlling Joel. And so, like, a dude will come in, and Joel will be like, Ellie, get down. And, like, he's stumbling, but he pushes her down to, like, wobbly shoot at the guys coming in. And you see Ellie several times, like, with precision, take down like a whole bunch of dudes, the opposite of how she was last week when she had to kill the dude for the first time and she freaked out about it. This time she's very like, oh, they're coming after Joel, pop pop, and it's really cool.
I was gonna save this for memorable moments, but since you sort of mentioned it, Ellie very much goes into a crisis mode. She's just she goes into full crisis mode to where she can't even panic. She's just like, okay, fucking get up. I'm going to shoot these guys. We're going. I'm taking charge. It's really cool how, like, I think that's a realistic response to a crisis for a lot of people.
Yeah. Like when Joel first falls, she panics for a little bit. She's like, "Oh my god, oh my god!" But then she like takes a breath and is like, "Okay, you have to tell me what to do." And like from then until David, she basically is like in control.
Well, like there is a bit of her panicking once they get out and he falls off the horse, but it cuts before we can see much of that because this game likes to cut in the middle of things.
Yeah.
Actually, one thing I was going to mention there is I was going to say this last week, but I just totally forgot. We talked about how the game likes the whole cut to black thing at the end of cutscenes. Something I sort of noticed before, but noticed way more around this time, so I'm glad I didn't mention it before. It does a sharp cut to black for like, I'd say a good, I don't know what, let's just pretend like this thing's running at 60 FPS. It probably is. It probably cuts for... Yeah, it probably cuts to black for a good, 15, 20 frames every time it goes from gameplay to cutscene, which is interesting because by modern standards, in games of the time, there are two options. Either it would just fade to black, and then you'd hear bzzz, and then it would load a cutscene. Or games that are a little bit more progressive, pushing boundaries, would do smash cuts. Literally just instantly goes from game to cutscene, and that involves a camera change, and it's like slightly jarring, but you just get used to it.
Notably, Uncharted uses smash cuts, and they're sister games, and so it's definitely an aesthetic.
Yeah, I mean, Smash Cut was definitely Smash Cuts. I mean, it's also just the most sensible thing to do. The cutscene starts, and now you're in it, right?
Yeah.
More modern games, though, will do a thing where the cutscene seamlessly transitions into the gameplay seamlessly turns into the cutscene. That's the modern trick that we see almost every AAA game do now. But this game, it uses the smash cut method, but the only difference is they have a solid black frame for a third of a second, and it's so like I noticed the black screen happening to punctuate dramatic moments, but I hadn't noticed that it actually happens every single time you go from gameplay to cutscene, which is a really, really cool, it serves a purely functional purpose. It makes the transition less jarring, but it does it by actually drawing more attention to it and giving it this stylistic little thing. I don't know. It's super, super cool. And I was noticing the heck out of it this time around.
So you eventually do make it to your horse and you get out of there. But while they're riding away, Joel falls unconscious and he falls off the horse. Ellie jumps down to get him. It's like, no, Joel, wake up. Cut to black. Winter.
Remember how long summer was?
Yep.
That was fall.
That was fall. So we fade in on the rabbit from the trailer that I did not even remember the trailer to this game, honestly, until I saw the rabbit. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember E3 and us freaking out at this rabbit. Ellie shoots the rabbit with a bow and arrow, and she's like, man, this isn't a whole lot of food, but I'll take what I can get. And then she looks over and she sees an elk, and she's like, oh fuck yeah, we're gonna eat like kings. We can eat a whole elk. And then you get to play as Ellie, which is super cool. But at the time when this happened, I was like, oh, Joel died. Like, if only for where we're going, if only he had died. But like gameplay wise, that would have been cool to like hide the fact that your main character dies and you just play as Ellie for the last half of the game. And I was like, that's totally the sort of cool thing that The Last of Us would have been on the cutting edge to do. But spoiler alert, he's not actually dead.
Spoiler alert. And don't worry, this is not actually a spoiler because what the spoiler actually means in practice, you wouldn't be able to predict. Last of Us 2 definitely does this.
That's cool.
It definitely does the principle of what you're saying. And it's every bit as cool as you're imagining it. And to be clear, I don't mean a character dying. It's something unrelated, but it's the same concept.
Yeah.
So basically, The Last of Us 2 does something cool narratively and mechanically.
Well, no, It does something very, very cool that is very, very much exactly what Sam's saying. And once you play it, you'll realize what I'm saying.
Yeah. I'm excited to play it. I bet it owns.
Me
if we do a shortcast on it, I'll make sure to call back what I'm saying now. That way y'all understand that I was right.
Yes. So you hunt the elk, and while I was playing it, I flashed back to the fact that my dad visions himself as a hunter. He's gone like 4 times, I remember, my entire life. But he watches like deer hunting shows and shit all the time. And it's very realistic in the fact that like when you're hunting a elk or a deer or something, they're fucking fast and they're bigger and stronger than you. So you shoot them, they run off because they're hurt, and then you track them by their blood or their tracks or whatever to find wherever they're catching their breath, wash, rinse, repeat until they go down. And so that's what you do here. And I thought it was really cool to
see, this is between people from Sam's part of Texas and people from my part of Texas. People from Sam's part of Texas are, quote, into hunting, which means they watch a bunch of hunting TV shows and talk about hunting all the time and have been hunting like 4 times in their life. People in my part of Texas are into hunting.
Yeah. They are hunters.
Although I've never shot an animal with a bow. I've shot a bow and I've shot animals with a gun, but I've never shot an animal with a bow.
Sounds hard.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not very good at shooting a bow. If I had to attempt... Sorry, when I say I've never shot an animal with a bow, I also mean I have not attempted to do so, not just that I have not succeeded in doing so.
Yeah.
I gotta say, one thing that I love about this section, which is emblematic of something I love about the entire game, is that there's no pop-up thing that says, follow the tracks, follow the blood drops on the ground. I think the only time I got something in this game popping up telling me do this is when in the Pittsburgh section at one point in the hotel, I was running around, I couldn't find a staircase, and then a thing popped up saying take the staircase after like 15 minutes.
Yep.
And it didn't tell me where the staircase was, so I still struggled a bit.
Are you all aware of Shoot the Hinges?
Yes, that's on my Call of Duty game where some guy just keeps going,
Shoot the Hinges is a funny little bit of performance art that someone on the internet made. It's on YouTube. You just look up Shoot the Hinges. Someone's playing Call of Duty Black Ops, I think, and there's a part where your characters are all running and you're chasing the bad guy and the music's pumping, and then it's like wintry, and then you get to a door and it's locked, and the guy next to you is like, shoot the hinges. And then the game, instruction pops up and it says, shoot the hinges. And you grab your little pistol and shoot the hinges. And if you're just going along and doing what the game tells you to do, it's an exciting little moment. You shoot the hinges and you're chasing the guy. But if you decide to not just go along the game's rails, it totally breaks the game in a really funny way, right? They're just sitting there yelling at you to shoot the hinges for like 10 minutes. And what happens is the guy ends up like backtracking and chilling, like just chilling in the snow. And meanwhile, you can hear the guy getting quieter and quieter, farther away, yelling at him every 10 seconds to shoot the hinges. And then I believe the person playing the game like smokes a cigarette or something like that while chilling. It's become an emblematic idea for the idea of this kind of game, the Call of Duty style of game, where it's like it's just constantly telling the player what to do, and you're being totally railroaded. And if you stop doing it, the game breaks. This game does it every bit as much as Call of Duty does, but the difference is that, first of all, the game does adapt to you a little bit better, But there's also parts where it doesn't. Like, for example, what happens if you don't chase the deer here? If you like go in the wrong direction? I have no fucking clue because you never have any inclination to do so. And that it shows the strength actually that this kind of design can actually work if you're doing it well and not just, and it's rooted in character, it's rooted in emotions. What I find this deer hunting sequence to be one of the most quietly very, 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 very subversive parts of the whole game, because the area that you're in here is really big. I noticed this even the first time I played the game. The area is huge. Like, you can go off in any direction for quite a bit if you feel like it. And that's because if the area wasn't big, it wouldn't feel real. It would feel like you were in a hallway. But yet, despite the area being big, I've never done anything besides follow the tracks of the deer, right? I'm always just following the tracks. And I've played this game twice now, and at neither of my playthroughs have I ever thought what if I turned left and just ran in this direction for a second until I hit a wall just to see what happens? No, I've never even thought of doing that. But the fact that the area is so wide open, it makes it feel like such a dynamic, real situation, even though it is very much like a shoot the hinges thing. It's really cool. Also, there's parts where what happens is dependent on whether you actually hit the deer or not. The game doesn't force you to hit the deer. If you shoot the bow at the deer and hit it, if you hit the deer, then there's lines of dialogue where she's like, oh, it's bleeding, I gotta chase it. But if you miss it, it just runs off. And presumably if you just continue missing it, I get maybe different cutscene plays. I don't know, because eventually you get to the end of the level, and at that point, presumably the deer's dead. Maybe the game just lies. I'm good at shooting, so I didn't miss the deer, right?
Yeah.
But theoretically, the game can account for that, because the game doesn't force you to aim well at the deer. You could theoretically miss it anyway. So it just feels like you're totally in control, even though this is a completely authored scene. And Naughty Dog is famous for this shit, but this is where they really nail it.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
When I was playing with Summer, she was she basically was like, how do you know where to go? Because the whole time I'm just turning the right direction and following the right thing and making my way forward. And I was like, well, video games for a long time have kind of just created a language that all of us can read and none of us can speak. And you just understand video game, and this game speaks video game so well, especially right here. Yep. The level design and gameplay of follow this deer, you follow the deer, you don't want to do anything else, and it does that in all these buildings. In a much lesser game, that game is called Dragon Age 2, the buildings could be really bad and be really easy to get lost in, and you have your eye on a mini map the entire time. This game doesn't have waypoints, it doesn't have mini maps, it doesn't have a compass, it doesn't have anything, and I never ever got lost because it is speaking video game so fluently.
I got lost 2 times, which in a 13-hour game with no mini map and no waypoints, pretty fucking good.
And also, Sam, I like what you're saying about how it speaks video game, because I would not but when people think of something as being gamey, this game is very gamey, they think oh, it's got waypoints, it's got pop-ups, it's got score multipliers. And when you take that stuff out, people are like, oh, this game isn't gamey. It doesn't feel like video game, it feels cinematic. But that's really a very false dichotomy. This game is extremely gamey. The fact that it's able to not have waypoints and objective markers is because it is so effectively speaking the language of 3D action game design, in ways that games that might have waypoints and mini maps don't, because they don't understand those fundamentals, right? It really is cool, how much late 90s, early 2000s, and late 2000s video game action game design is 100% suffused into every bit of this game's DNA. So it is 100% a gamer's game, while also pushing the boundaries of cinematic authored experiences. It's really wild how it does both. But Sam, what you just said about knowing where to go, it reminds me of an essay I read one time about the game Eco, where they talk about, I don't remember the whole narrative, the whole essay. It was I think a rather lengthy essay. But it talks about. Have you played Eco, Sam?
I have not.
Well,
I think I have it for my PS4, but I haven't actually played it.
Well, the whole game is like, hey, you got this girl, and you and this magical girl are trying to escape from the castle. You and the princess are trying. It's like kind of you could say the whole game's an escort mission, except it's not. Except that'd be underselling it.
Yeah.
In the game's third act, you become separated from the girl. The girl's evil queen kidnaps her, takes her back to her keep, and you're now on your own. And when you're on your own, you like fall down to the bottom. And at one point, there's like a boat. And the point is, you go back instead of escaping, and just taking your freedom, you go back into the castle to save her, right? And the article I read made the case. They were like, well, no, the hero doesn't choose to go back to save her. That doesn't speak anything to the character's character. He goes that way because that's the only direction he can go. And I'm like, and then someone else commented, and they didn't need to say this because I was already thinking it, but they said it too. They were like, no, video game design level design is a metaphor. The fact that the level design only lets Eco go in this direction is because that's the direction the character wants to go.
Yeah.
Like that's why it is that way. Like, it's not, oh, the hallway only goes towards the boss. I guess I'll go towards the boss now. No. To be gamey is to use the game's level design in synthesis with the narrative. Like, yeah, the fact that Ellie can't just turn around and run in a random direction and go all the way to Toledo is because she does not want to go to Toledo.
No, she's hungry, and the elk will feed her and Joel for a week.
Exactly, 13. But I pay a lot more attention to this stuff than most people do. So.
I know we've been on this tangent for a while, but I do want to go back to something that Maddy Race said. It reminded me how, we're here and we track because that's fun, and that's sort of what those games drive you to do. Push it around, push this extremely expensive thing around, make it look stupid. I never got that impulse in The Last of Us. I don't know why. I don't know what that says about The Last of Us, but I feel like it says something really
Maybe it's because playing the role the game is wanting you to play, it's not a restriction. It's actually just more fun. Like, you literally enjoy pretending to be this character more than you enjoy fucking around with game systems.
And I think it dials into the, like I mentioned last time when I was talking about try the game on normal, because the stress of playing the game gets you into the headspace to enjoy this piece of art. And I feel it's kind of related there, where like I am also trying to survive this zombie apocalypse, so I relate to Joel and Ellie being like, oh, I have to do this thing, because if they don't do the thing, they die. Just like if I don't throw the bottle and distract the clicker, I die. And you get, it's like this game is so gamey in like the good way and not in the BioShock Infinite way.
Well, it's gamey in that it creates a certain space, creates a certain world. I always like to say that games in many ways are like ballet, and I mean like classical ballet, not like more modern stuff. Modern stuff, nothing against it. It's just I don't think it is what I'm about to say. In classical ballet, it's not just all dancing. It's not just like the big parts where everyone's dancing. There's a lot of parts in a ballet where it's not these beautifully choreographed numbers. It's like miming a story. Like if you watch seriously, Swan Lake. That's what I'm trying to think of. The opening parts Swan Lake's like a beautiful dancing scene. But then after that, it's like, oh, we're at the Queen's, we're at the castle, and there's like, I don't know, some plot happening. There's no talking. It's all done, visually, but it's like the Queen and the King are presiding, and then the like there's like the vizier, and then like there's some visitor who comes to visit, and they bow to each other, and then they have this dinner. And there's nothing that, again, we would call dancing. The characters aren't doing acrobatic twirls and and beautiful motions. No, they're just walking. Like they walk across the stage, they walk back, but they walk a certain way. Because when you're watching ballet, it basically prescribes a world in which everyone moves in certain ways. It's like they're following a rule book as to like how do we move. So when the character gets up out of their seat and walks across the room to go talk to another character or to, you know, mime talking to them, they walk in the ballet kind of way, which is this graceful, elegant sort of motion on your toes, you know, with your sort of thing. And that's just, they never break kayfabe. They never stop doing that. It's not like a musical. It's not like a musical where there's the parts where they're just talking and acting, and then the parts where they're singing. No, it's all the same thing where they are moving in a certain way. And a video game is in many ways, at least ideally, a gamey kind of game, is the same thing. You've got this world that operates under certain rules, and those rules affect, ideally, not just the way the enemies move and the mechanics, but the way that the player's brain thinks, and ideally, also the way that the characters move in the narrative. The characters in the narrative are affected by the same rules that we, the player, are affected by, in a slightly metaphorical way, of course, because it's being abstracted using video game abstractions. I think games like Dragon Quest do this super well, TBH. And it's, if you successfully create that world, then you enjoy being in that world. You're not going to start doing twirly flips on the stage because you'd rather do that. No, you're moving according to the rules that are given to you, and you like it because the feeling of being immersed in this world, like the escapism of being in a different world. Escape is not the right word for it, but whatever. The good brain chemicals that happen when you're immersing yourself into a fantastical situation that affects the brain and the emotions and the heart and the body only works if you buy into it and if you follow the rules that are set to you and you like following the rules. You know, some people don't like following rules. Some people always like to break rules for any reason. If someone gives you a rule, they won't even say, why do we have this rule? They'll just say, I'm breaking the rule because I'm just a rule-breaking kind of person. Well, look, I'm not that kind of person, okay? I think following rules can be a source of great gratification and joy and self-fulfillment if they're good rules, if the rules are looking out for you, you know? And I mean, as the difference between me, who was raised as a conservative Christian and is not conservative anymore, but that is how I was raised, and, you know, versus like like an anarchist, basically. I'm just talking about how I don't like anarchists again. Sorry. I'm saying sometimes following rules can be good for your soul.
And every time you record a podcast, you go and it's not working.
It's not working. Yeah. Anyway, that's my vibe on this whole thing.
Anywho, this game rules. So after Ellie eventually catches up to the elk, two dudes are there. Their names are David and James. David is the one kind of in control. David offers to trade with Ellie for some of the elk because she's a little girl as a big old elk. He's like, we have people, and she's like, I have lots of people too. Don't fuck with me. My people will get you. And he's like, well, we want to trade. Like, we have medicine. And she's like, I need the medicine. Like, I'll give you whatever the fuck you want. Give me some medicine. So David sends James off to the camp to go and get it. But Ellie, this whole time, is has them at bow point, and then at this point she takes David's gun and has them at gunpoint, and it's like, I'm gonna kill you if you move, but I need this medicine. So they head inside of this building to take shelter, and David tries to talk to her, get to know her, get through to her, but she doesn't trust him, as she shouldn't, because he's the villain of the piece. So spoilers.
Which I feel like the game, because of the writing and the acting and the directing and the music, is very much like signaling he's the villain in that kind of way where it's not a twist when he's the villain. You're like, oh yeah, no, this guy's a snake, and you're just waiting for the shoe to drop. It's really nice. I like how they do it. It's kind of hammy.
I remembered this guy. I forgot I shared a name with him.
I forgot you shared a name with him too. So while they're inside, clickers show up, and David reveals that he was hiding a pistol from Ellie, so good reason she wasn't trusting him. Then there's a super intense, like, mechanical flipping of this game on its head, where you're defending a place instead of trying to fight through a place. which hasn't happened before, and it's super cool.
It's great. I love this set piece.
I died a lot, but it was really fun.
But it was great.
So, here's the point where I realized that the knife that Ellie attacks Tess with at the very beginning of the game, she's had this whole time while making Joel like make fucking toothbrush shivs that break every time he stabs a zombie this whole time, and she has an instant kill, infinitely sharp weapon this whole time, and pisses me off. It felt awesome to be able to just knife whoever I wanted when playing as Ellie, but it's like, come on, like Joel could have been using this for a long time.
Maybe, and what you're saying is true, and it's extremely fucking funny, but maybe if we want to keep it on the Ellie's awesome and Joel sucks train, maybe the reason that the knife doesn't break when Ellie uses it is because she's better at using knives.
Probably so.
Maybe Joel is too aggressive and applies more force necessary, thus breaking his tools. And if he used such a knife, it wouldn't last very long. Whereas Ellie, with grace and tact, is able to use a knife in a more efficient way so that it retains its sharpness.
I think. Yes.
Do Ellie's shivs break in Last of Us Part 2? Or does she get to keep this knife?
Yeah, they do. Good point. But she's changed a lot by the time you get to that game, though.
I just was wondering because like it feels awesome to be able to kill everything and that kind of be Ellie's thing, but also the game rules when
it wouldn't make any sense or be fun.
There's still 3 clickers, and now you have no shivs and no arrows, and so you have to kind of...
It probably will not surprise you to know that one of the major scenes of Last of Us Part 2 is that Ellie, in many ways, does become her father.
Yes. I could tell, because she's on the cover of that game, and Joel's on the cover of this game.
Exactly.
So after you finally kill all of the infected, David is like, "Oh hey, we make a good team. You know, I always say that everything happens for a reason. For instance, a few weeks ago, I sent some of my friends over to the University of Colorado to get some supplies, and then all of them were slaughtered by this crazy man who's traveling with a little girl. Isn't that weird, James, who now has Ellie at gunpoint?" And it's like super intense, but David is like, "James, put your gun down, give her the medicine, let her go." And Ellie's like, bet. And so she takes the antibiotics, gets on her horse, and runs out of town. She comes to this little suburbs area where she's been taking care of Joel. Turns out he is not dead. He is just
mostly dead.
Mostly dead. She has like sewed his wound shut, but it's gross and nasty because she had to sew it with whatever you can find in an apocalypse, so it's not sterile at all.
The entire the Left Behind DLC, half of it is in the past, half of it is during the events of the game. Basically, the entire plot of current events Left Behind is finding stuff to sew up Joel.
Okay, I should really play that.
It's good. It's not as good as the main game, but it's pretty good. I'll probably talk about it more in moments since there's interesting things.
Yeah. So she gives the antibiotics to Joel. It's like this should help you have a miraculous 100% recovery in the span of one night to sleep. So she goes to sleep for the night. In the morning, she's awoken by the sounds of David's men looking for her out in the town, and they followed her horse tracks there to try and follow her so that they could kill Joel for revenge for killing all of their friends. So Ellie gets on the horse to draw them away from Joel, and she's like running through the town, and they're like, "Shoot her," and they're like, "But David wants to keep her," and they're like, "Fuck David, shoot her." And they shoot your horse, and so you tumble down this snow embankment after your horse falls, and you just keep on running. And so she almost gets away, but as she's going through this old store of some sort, she's like trying to sneak through it. David shows up, he catches her, puts her in a chokehold, and knocks her out. She comes to in a cell And when she wakes up, she sees like outside of her cell is like a kitchen area, and David and his friends are all cannibals, and they're butchering some dead human body to make food, and it's yucky. And she's like,
have a zombie apocalypse story around this time without there being cannibals.
It's true.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, that's fucking disgusting. He's like, me and Joel are the same. We're killing people to protect our own, saving them by any means necessary. And Ellie's like, fuck off. And David's like, tell me your name so I can convince people that you'll come around and join our cult. And so she's like, oh, okay. And she like softens to him a bit. So he comes over, puts his hand on her cell. She grabs his hand and breaks his fucking finger.
That's
and
fucking right.
And she tries to get his keys, but he like slams her into the bars, and she falls down. And he's like, "Tell them that Ellie is the girl who broke your fucking finger." And I love her so much.
She's so great.
But all this does is make David real pissed, and he promises that he's going to cut Ellie into tiny pieces. So then we cut, and we get to control Joel again, and he is looking for Ellie, and he looks for her by killing a lot of bandits. At the end of this level, he captures two of them, and he tortures them like incredibly graphically to find out where Ellie is.
It's an upsetting scene.
It really is. And so both of them comply, and they're like, hey, Ellie's here, you can go and get them. And so then he kills them anyways. And then he's like, hey, look, why'd you kill him? Like, I promise I'll do blah blah. He's like, well, too bad. And he kills both of them. Joel is a bad man. I no longer felt comfortable making Joel do these things for the rest of the game.
I don't know. At this point, I feel like they're pretty asking for it at this point, if you ask me.
I agree that they were asking for it, but I don't think torturing someone for information and then also killing them and then just it felt gratuitous here. And
I mean, he didn't know they were from a cannibal cult.
Yeah,
I guess that's true that he didn't actually know that, because if he did know that, it'd be like, buddy, you can't trust these guys, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I mean, last time he killed a bunch of people who deserved it, because as Sam mentioned earlier very astutely, they did shoot first. Their friends later came and tried to kill him and kidnapped Ellie, so...
Yeah. So,
although I guess he doesn't know that either.
He doesn't know that either. He just woke up, is looking for Ellie, found a couple people.
That's interesting, actually, because all of the reasons that would give Joel very good, even I might even say morally or at least ethically reasonable reasons to kill these people are only known to us and not him. It's kind of a little weird reverse dramatic irony kind of thing. So from specifically his point of view, he's being real bad.
Yeah. So back with Ellie, David is about to, like, has her on the butcher block, is about to cut her up. But Ellie is like, I'm infected, check my sleeve. And he's like, fine, I'll play. And he sets the knife down and he pulls up her sleeve, sees her bite mark. He's
very
like,
important. While he was dragging her out of her cell, she bit his arm.
Oh, I didn't even catch that while playing or while writing the notes.
She bites his arm, and then she says, I'm infected, and you are too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And David is like, it's bullshit, but it convinces James enough to, like, rattle him a little bit. So Ellie has an opening. She grabs the knife that David had set down and kills James and makes a break for it. She then kills a whole lot of cannibals and makes her way to this restaurant that it was the part one I mentioned last week, where you come into this obvious boss arena and you're like, well, this is going to be important later. So when you try to get out of the restaurant, David is there. He comes in, like, shoves her in, is like about to beat the shit out of her, and he knocks her back into a oil lamp that falls and sets the fucking place on fire.
That's fucking right.
So then you have a boss fight in a place that's on fire, and that's your ticking clock. If you take too long to do this boss fight, you die in a fire, and it's pretty cool.
This is the part where Naughty Dog is like, I told you, this whole thing is that, like, yeah, the set pieces are really elaborate and high budget, but, like, they keep it pretty down to earth.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, setting the whole building on fire is just, like, that little extra little nod, right? Of, like, this is the literal only boss battle in the entire game. We've built up all this drama. It's a huge character moment. Of course we're going to set the entire building on fire. Like, are we going to have them flying in a airplane and, like, do skydiving or using superpowers to blast each other? Or are we going to have, like, Nathan Drake, like, running down a mountain that's having an avalanche on it, or, like, swinging from a giant bridge? No. We're not going to do anything that crazy. But we are going to set the entire building on fire, and you are going to be extremely impressed by the graphics.
Yes. So, in the boss fight, you just have to sneak up on David and shiv him 3 times, which sounds easy, but it's actually not. There is glass on the floor. There's stuff you can bump into that'll make noise. The place is actually fairly open. There's not a whole lot of places to hide. There's, like, a lot of booths that you can hide behind, but, like,
very open into boss battle. It's
there's
great.
Very long sight lines in it, and so it's not super easy to get him the 3 times. But once you do get him 3 times, Ellie jumps on his back, and they struggle for a bit, and they end up, like, in the struggle knocking each other out, and they both fall down. So then back as Joel, you show up in town to where Ellie was being held, and you find her backpack and all of the humans strung up like butchers, and Joel is like, oh god, oh no, please not Ellie, anything else. And as he's, like, freaking out, he then...
The guys I killed were a cannibal cult. I'm in the clear.
Yes.
Phew! I was starting to feel bad about myself for a while there.
But outside, he sees that the restaurant is on fire. He figures that's as good a place as any to check, so he runs in to get her. Inside the restaurant, Ellie and David come to, but crucially, David comes to slightly before Ellie. It's like this really long shot where you can see both of them, like, starting to stir, and you're like, come on, Ellie, get the fuck up, Ellie. And then she doesn't, and David does, and it sucks. So you crawl as Ellie towards this machete that's nearby, and as you're going along, David gets up and he's, like, kicking the shit out of her and yelling at her, like, oh, we could have, like, we could have been civil, but no, you're an evil person, and blah 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 blah, while he's kicking a 14-year-old girl. So eventually she does make it to the machete. She grabs it and, like, with a sharp implement, beats the shit out of David. Like, she is hitting him as if she had a baseball bat, but it's a machete. So I'm so glad that she's doing it to the camera and not the camera showing us David's face, because
he murders the bazonkers out of him.
Yeah.
He is very much not showing up in The Last of Us Part 2.
He, as Sam would say, dead.
He's dead.
He got owned.
So, as she's doing that, Joel comes in and grabs her, and he's like, "It's Ellie, it's me. I'm here to rescue you." And she, like, cries into her shoulder, and we cut to black again. Spring. In the spring chapter, they are finally in Salt Lake City, making their way to where
making their way downtown.
I just want to give context for the size of the chapter skips or the time skips in this game. I checked. Denver to Salt Lake City is about 500 miles. So we skip a lot.
Yeah. And the one from summer to fall is thousands of miles from Pittsburgh to Wyoming.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think about that since we didn't, like...
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And, like, even if there's not zombies, which I do think the implication is that, if you're not in a populated area, they're not spending their whole day fighting zombies. They're spending most of their day walking. But I'm sure there's at least some zombie fighting. That's why Ellie gets so much better at it between chapters, right? But yeah, even without the zombie fighting, like, hoofing it through just random wilderness, maybe occasionally taking a road, or maybe they have to avoid roads, who knows, for their own safety. Like, that's gonna fucking take a while, even without having to fight zombies.
Yeah.
Maybe a whole season.
Exactly.
So when we fade in Salt Lake City, Ellie is basically nonverbal. She is obviously extremely fucked up from the run-in with the cannibals. And like the whole first part of the game, Joel was a man of super few words. He would just be like, "Scoot, kid," and Ellie would then be like, "Oh, like what about with blah blah blah? What did you ever think about blah blah blah?" And just going off constantly, and Joel would basically not respond. And at this point, it's reversed, where he's telling her about how he used to play the guitar and used to sing and all of this stuff, and she's just like, "Yeah, okay, cool." Things like that, barely even talking. And mechanically, they do things that are cool as well, where we didn't really talk about it, but the triangle button oftentimes is the call Ellie over to do the thing for you button. And there's a couple times here where you see the thing you need Ellie to do, and you press triangle, and Joel turns around, and Ellie's distracted doing something else, and it's like, "Ellie, like, come on, I need you to go get the ladder." And she's like, "Oh, yeah, sorry."
I loved when they did that.
It was so good. So you make your way through the area, and Ellie brightens up because she sees giraffes outside, and there's a phenomenal scene where Ellie just sits and watches the giraffes, and it lasts as long as you want it to. And since I'm playing on the the remake on the PS4, playing it on the PS5, I was like, I want this to be my background. I'm going to go into photo mode, and I'm going to take a picture of this. The photo mode in this game sucks because it only orbits around your character. It's not a free moving camera, and there's the big invisible wall that keeps Joel from jumping off and running after the giraffes, and the camera bumps into that invisible wall, so you can't actually get in front of Ellie and frame it good. And it made me really upset because I really wanted that.
That's a shame.
I want to note
the giraffe is giraffes are big.
They are.
Y'all notice that?
Yeah.
Giraffes are really big animals. Like,
I've seen a giraffe.
Good Lord. I guess theoretically I have seen a giraffe. Like, I've been to an zoo, though I can't recall having seen a giraffe. And yeah, anyway, they're just
probably
in case
seen them up close.
Yeah, in case y'all hadn't, just fun little fact for all you animal heads out there. Giraffes are real big.
Yeah. I want to know exactly how they do this scene because I really like it. You are boosting Ellie up so that she can get a ladder for you. Very conveniently placed ladder, as so often they are in this game. And she's lowering the ladder down to you. Then she drops it. It clatters to the ground, and she just runs off.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to pick up the ladder and climb up there. And you just hear her yelling for you to come quickly, and you're running after her, and Gustavo Santaolalla's music is doing something really weird. I don't know if it's meant to be like, oh shit, maybe something's happening, but it's like very ambiguous.
Like a lot of his music, it is very ambiguous.
Yeah, but then so you have to chase after her for a surprisingly long time, in my opinion. And then you find her chilling with some giraffes, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
And Joel actually walks up and pets the giraffe, and it's great.
It's super cool. So when you do finally decide to end the scene, you go to open the door, and Joel stops and doesn't actually open the door. And he turns around to Ellie and is like, "Look, we don't have to go through with this. We can just go live with Tommy, live in their commune. Everything can be fine. We don't have to keep going." And then Ellie makes it extremely clear to Joel that she wants to save the world. She says that she can't let all of this be for nothing. She's gone through a whole lot of shit, and so she wants to save the world. She looks him dead in the face and tells him her wish is to save the world. So Joel says that, well, I'm not leaving here without you, so let's hurry up, and then we can go and do whatever we want afterwards. So along the way, Ellie reveals to Joel that she has the picture of Sarah, and this time he says thanks and keeps it. He's like, I guess I can't keep running from my past. So you make your way to the hospital, and you to get there, you have to go through another flooded subway, but this time it's become like a rapid river instead of just being still water like before. And there's a particularly tricky jump that dislodges the subway car that you're standing on, and it gets carried away by the rapids. Ellie, who, as you recall, cannot swim, jumps in after him to save him, and she manages to get the subway car open so Joel's no longer trapped, but then she gets swept away by the current. So Joel swims out after her and drags her onto land, but she's not breathing. So he's trying CPR, trying to get her awake, as some dudes show up in like military looking gear with guns, and they're like, put your hands up. And he's like, she's not breathing, I'm trying to save her. And they're like, tough, and they pistol whip Joel in the face.
I want to mention that slightly before the rushing rapids part, we have our last infected battle of the game.
Yep.
And it's super great.
It's the one that ends with the three big dudes at the same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 bloaters at the end.
You know, I was about to say, given the way that this game, again, pushes the boundaries in its back half of how long you can go without any cutscenes, or without any battles, I was going to say, actually, that I feel like having any battles in this game before this moment in this chapter doesn't actually make structural sense. That was a bit of a cop-out. Like, they lost their nerve and their confidence and thought we got to throw a battle in there, whereas really just walking and talking all the way until you meet these people would have made more sense. But I hadn't thought about the fact that if it wasn't for this battle, we would not have an infected battle in the entire final act of the game. Yeah. So that makes sense. You got to have for plot reasons, they couldn't have a big infected battle at the end. So they're like, oh, right, we probably should bring this half of the game's battle system to some kind of apotheosis.
Yeah.
Although there's still not a particularly dramatic plot reason for it.
Yeah, and you have no indication that it's your last infected battle. Other than that, it's really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, come to think of it, one criticism I would have of this game is that as the game goes on, you do start to realize that the human battles just are a lot more interesting than the infected battles because humans are smarter. They also become a bigger part of the game, but also it's just like, yeah, no, the infected battles are like a little like you kind of know what you're doing. Whereas with the human battles, it's they have really smart AI, right? And the tactical considerations in the stealth is super, super complex. So, maybe the game's developers felt the same way. They were just like, yeah, we're not really sure what to do with the infected battles after this point of like the player being a certain skill level, you know?
I'm surprised we haven't mentioned it so far, but Action Button by Tim Rogers has a video review of The Last of Us, and in it he talks about how he feels that the infected battles and the human battles, the way they work differently, they punctuate each other, and each makes the other more meaningful in an interesting way.
I've been trying my very best. My entire overriding goal these last 2 episodes has been to make sure that none of the points I make are just what Tim Rogers says in his video. And to be clear, that really mean that I was copying him. That could mean that I independently came to the same conclusion because I've read everything the man's ever written. So when I watched his video, everything he said, I was like, yeah, duh. But yeah, no, I've very tried to, at least for my part, at least. If you've already watched Tim Rogers' video, hopefully nothing I've said has been repeating something you've already heard.
Yeah, I haven't watched the video yet because
it's great.
I similarly, like, if you go back and listen to the Legend of Dragoon ones, you can tell that I had just watched Nega Sam's video on Legend of Dragoon, and I brought up a lot of his points, and I felt like I was cheating on my math test when I did it, and it's a yucky feeling, and I don't want to do it. So I try, when I know we're coming up to a game, I try to just zero information about it. 100% until we record.
Even though it's 3 goddamn hours long, it's not. It's like 2. He does really only unpack a specific angle of looking at the game.
Yes.
Like he's talking about a very specific thing about the game, and he talked about that for 2 hours. So as long as I'm not talking about that, it's free for all. And I can feel free to feel like I'm actually contributing to the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I've not been copying talking points from the video. I mean, when Maddy Grace and I talked about Doom on my now defunct podcast, Bernard Remembers, we talked for a long time about Doom and about how many great things there are about it. And we did not repeat anything that Tim Rogers said in his 3-hour review of Doom, because games like Doom and The Last of Us are good enough that you can talk about them for great lengths and not have to repeat things when talking about how good they are.
Yeah, kind of like how when I read the review, the Jacobin magazine review of In the Heights, it was a very critical review, but at the end of the review, I was like, wow, this lady just, I think it was Eileen Jones, great writer. I was like, wow, she just tore this movie a new one, and yet addressed none of the things that I thought were terrible about the movie.
So Joel comes to, and Marlene is there, and she says that she basically lost all of her men and everything, including all of her hope, trying to cross the country. And right when she was about to give up hope completely, there Ellie is, and she's like, it's a sign, like, this is a great thing. And Joel's like, well, you owe it all to Ellie. She's the one that fought like hell to get here. Where is she? Can I go see her? And Marlene says no, she's being prepped for surgery. The doctors are going to remove the fungus from her brain to make a vaccine. And Joel is like, but this kills the Ellie. And he's like, find someone else. And Marlene's like, look, I get it. I understand the surrogate parent feelings that you're having right now, but I've known Ellie since she was a baby. I promised her mom when her mom died that I would take care of her. And yet this could heal the world. It is super important. And this is what Ellie would have wanted. And he's like, okay, whatever. And Marlene leaves, and she leaves somebody to watch over Joel, and Joel kills that guy. And then the game makes my hands press the buttons to destroy the only hope left for humanity as you fight your way through a bunch of the hospital to get to the surgery room where Ellie is.
So this is the final battle. And I'll get into my memos, I was mentioning here. The level design in this part of the game is dog shit. And I don't even mean that as a criticism. I just mean it's completely uninteresting, because why would it be interesting? It's a hospital with a bunch of hallways. It's like the game is like making you do something that is so brutal dramatically and unfun that they're like, we're not even going to make this fun to play. It just sucks. You're just going down a hallway blasting people. It is an extremely amazing weaponization of what I would definitely consider traditionally bad game design.
What I find interesting here is that you get a new weapon, the assault rifle. The assault rifle is very much, you just point at something and it dies. You don't upgrade it. I don't think it even has weapon sway. It's very uninteresting compared to all the other weapons, and it's super overpowered, and it's just like something to enable you to do this horrible thing as efficiently as possible.
Which is not to say that this part of the game is easy. I did actually die a couple times, but it's like it is not really brain thinking. It is just blasting. It is just a shooter, and I would possibly say that the game's mechanics don't quite work very well here, but again, emotionally and conceptually, that doesn't even matter. So it's a very, very striking final battle. That is, it makes a real big impression, even though it also makes zero impression because there's nothing to differentiate one hallway from the next.
Yeah, and I feel like you mentioned that it's dog shit and probably on purpose, and I think it's because, like we mentioned earlier, when Ellie was going after the elk, not to get back on that tangent, but the game, like you were Ellie in that moment. You wanted to get the elk. Why you didn't want to go and explore the snowy mountainside. You wanted to get the elk, and you were dialed in, gameplay wise, everything being the characters. Here, you're starting to turn on Joel, and so getting out of the I need to survive and do the Last of Us things because I am Joel. It's like, oh, now I'm playing the just hallway shooter game where you just go through and you shoot people and you point a gun at them and they die, and it like starts to divorce that like buddy feeling you have with Joel here, which I think
I don't know if I agree. I can see how that I can 100% see how that works. Mm-hmm. Though for my part, it was the opposite. It was, no, I'm still 100% in this guy's mindset, which is why I'm in sync with this game's like laser focus, right? Like Joel's not thinking strategy. He's not to go along with what I said earlier about eco, right? Where level design is just a metaphorical reflection of the game of the character's internal world. Like he's not thinking about taking cover or scrounging for supplies or sneaking or using his ears. He's like, I'm going to aggressively murder these people as quickly as I can. Yeah. And the level design does not allow you to do anything but that. And for me, I mean, I guess I would say that it like makes you feel very uncomfortable, but not in a way that impeded my playing at all because you're so dialed into it, right? But I can see how it can kind of work either way. But it's like Joel's not having fun here either. Like getting revenge, even if you are compelled to do something, even if you're like self-destruction is not fun. Even if you're compelled to do it and you can't do anything other than it, it is still not a fun thing to be in the middle of as you're doing it, right? So but that's just because I have a different emotional reaction in this game than you do.
So I wrote. So like while I was writing my notes, I had the game movie up running at 1.5 speed to like remind me of everything that happened. And so at this point I was writing ahead of what was happening on the thing because the game movie was stopping to kill a lot of people. And I was like, in my notes, I was like, you get to the top room and the nurses are there and they're begging for their lives and Joel kills them anyways. But no, Joel doesn't kill them anyways. In the game movie, you can walk to he just walks to Ellie and presses triangle and leaves them. Sam Allman killed the nurses who
there you go.
I
definitely didn't know you could not kill them. That's really funny.
I thought
the game does like literally set you up for it. Like I think that it might take control of you for a second and like make you aim at them or something.
Well, the first guy pulls a gun at you, and so
I thought he just pulls a scalpel at you.
I think he pulls some sort of weapon. He's going to shoot you, but the other ones that are cowering, all it does is point its camera at them. You can continue moving your camera and just grab Ellie and leave. But
I killed the guy that was quote threatening me unquote, the guy who brought what I think is a scalpel to a gunfight. I killed him because I thought I had to, but I did leave the others.
I did not.
Yep, so, did not even consider that.
Yeah. So Joel picks up Ellie, and then in a mimic of the first scene of the game, Joel carries Ellie and runs from all of the danger of the people shooting at them. And he runs, makes it to an elevator to get out to the parking garage. But when the elevator opens, Marlene is there and has him at gunpoint. Everybody has everybody at gunpoint in this game. She says that he's not saving Ellie from taking her away from this. This world isn't a good place. Like, she might not turn into a zombie, but she might get eaten by one anyways, or shot by a bandit, or they'll do worse things than just shooting her before they shoot her. And this is not a good world. Putting her out into this world is not a kindness. And then she says, rightfully, as Ellie told us moments ago, that Ellie would have wanted to sacrifice herself to save everyone. Then it smash cuts to Joel and Ellie driving away in a car. Ellie is asleep in the back seat, and she wakes up. She's like, "What happened?" And Joel fucking lies and says that there are a whole bunch of people like Ellie out there that are immune, but the doctors haven't been able to do anything with that and make a vaccine, so the Fireflies have given up on finding a cure. Ellie visibly doesn't buy it, and she turns away from him in the car to try to go back to sleep. Then we see a flashback, and while Marlene was talking to Joel draws his pistol from like his holster on his side and underneath Ellie and shoots Marlene. He then takes Ellie to the truck, comes back to Marlene, who's bloody and basically dead on the floor already, and she begs for her life, like just please don't kill me, leave me alone. And Joel says, "No, you'll just come after her," and shoots Marlene in the head.
I do want to note that at the beginning of this flashback portion of the scene, Marlene has held up her hands, not holding her gun at Joel anymore. She is surrendering because she is trusting the humanity and goodness in Joel to do the right thing.
And he doesn't. So then we fade in to back in Jackson, and Joel and Ellie get out of the car, and a healthy Joel is not the player character. Ellie is. And so you're playing as Ellie, following Joel to head into town. But right before you go in, Ellie stops Joel and tells her story about how when she was in Boston, her and her best friend Riley got bit at the same exact time. So they were like, well, let's just be poetic bastards about it, and let's just lose our minds together, and we'll be best friends and as zombies too. But then Ellie never turned, and Riley did. So Riley was the first one of her loved ones that died, and then it was Tess, and then it was Sam. And Joel is like, look, surviving is hard, but you have to find something that's worth it to keep fighting for. And she goes, that's not what I'm like. That's not it. That's not the important part. Swear to me that everything that you said about the Fireflies is true. And you can tell in her face, she knows that Joel is full of shit, and she knows he's about to lie. So he looks at her dead in her face at her most vulnerable emotional point and says, everything I said is true. And Ellie says, okay. Credits. Fuck Joel.
It's a good ending. I don't agree that she believes that he's lying to her, though. I don't think that. I think that she wants to believe that he's telling the truth, and then she does.
I think, it's, now that there's a sequel, it's hard to say if it's open-ended or not. A sequel I haven't played especially, but I think this is an amazing point to end the story at. And I think the question of, does Ellie believe him? How much does she know? Because, I don't know, I'm sort of thinking it would totally make sense if Marlene told Ellie she was going to die, and then she wakes up alive and is like, what the fuck's going on? And has that reason to not believe Joel.
I actually think there's a bit of... I wonder
what secrets there are here.
Isn't it true that Joel and Ellie are both knocked out at the same time?
Because she's down from being drowned, and he gets...
I feel like... I could be wrong here, but if I recall some, single line of dialogue worded a certain way, I think that she is unconscious from the point that she is almost drowned through that entire sequence. So I think that she does not have the ability to make that choice. For example, Marlene never says this is what she said she wanted. She says this is what she would have wanted, right? Yeah, which isn't the same thing. Which does, I think, make it a lot more emotionally complicated. Because that is other people unilaterally making decisions for her, not just Joel, but other people as well. Even though, yes, they're definitely right. That's what she would have wanted, 100% right. But it is a lot more complex and interesting than just if she was like, yes, please do it, and then Joel was like, no, fuck you, right? And also the fact that Joel and Ellie never get to have a conversation about this, right? Everything from the start of the winter sequence is mostly just Joel and Ellie not being able to talk to each other because they're separated or one of them's unconscious, which I think is a huge, huge thing about this game. is that the characters start off unable to talk to each other because they are both too stoic to talk to each other. And then later on, they would talk to each other, but they can't because of circumstances. So there's all these unspoken things, people making assumptions about each other, people not being given the chance, life not giving them the opportunity to achieve closure, to achieve character growth, to make good decisions. It's really heartbreaking.
Yeah. I am kind of upset that there's The Last of Us Part 2 because this ending is the perfect Inception top spinning, where the point is not does it fall or does it not. It's the fact that you don't know, and that's what makes it cool and interesting. And
I will say, as the only person who's played Last of Us Part 2, I will say the thing I just said about her believing him, that's not because I played the second game. That is the exact takeaway that I had the first time I played the game. That is me saying what I thought the first time I played the game and pretending I still think that. So I'm not spoiling anything, just for the record.
I think probably she says in her brain she believes him, but she doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, it's complicated. It's not a binary, you know?
Yeah. It is very complicated emotions, and the game just made you sit with it for 7 years. Yeah. And that's pretty cool.
Funny, you mentioned how this is the perfect Inception top. It's also a billion times better than the stupid Inception top. Which, you know, that movie's fine and all, but it's kind of a dumb ending. Like, it very clearly is one thing or the other, and they're just not telling you as a gotcha. Whereas this is like layers upon layers of ambiguity, right? I agree. When they first made this game, people said, "Are y'all going to make a sequel?" And they're like, "No, we're not going to make a sequel." And I was like, "Duh, why would they? That's stupid." And when they announced they were making a sequel, I was like, what?"
Yeah.
But as you would expect, this lingering issue is like, I feel like a cowardly thing to do would have been to make a sequel that somehow avoids addressing this issue. And they did not do the cowardly thing. It's like, no, this is the most important thing to ever happen in her life, and this, if a sequel, if it exists, must deal with it head on. And it does.
Good. I really want to play The Last of Us Part 2. I almost impulse bought it because it was on sale for the summer sale this last week. It down to like $35, I think, and that's a good price for it. But I chickened out because
that is a good price for it.
I chickened out because rent and groceries and stuff are real.
Yeah, that'll happen. That'll do it.
Yeah, but let's listen to the end credits track and then talk about our memorable moments. So, I'll start because I only have a couple. So, after the boss fight with David, the Ellie goes to get the machete, and how you know that she's going to go and get the machete and do the thing is inside of the cutscene. It flashes the game UI. This is the thing you can pick up white on the machete. Like at the dramatic moment of her noticing it, it flashes white.
That's awesome.
It's so cool. It's like it's fucking gamey. It uses video game as a language so well, and also I love it.
The video game.
I was going to comment. What's that?
The video game abstraction is that when these characters notice something they can use, it flashes white. So, yeah, why in a cutscene when a character sees an important thing they can use, flash white? Of course it can.
And what I love is, kind of think back to like the game Mirror's Edge, right? Mirror's Edge has that really cool austere art style, but then literally like interactable objects just are colored red, and it did that thing they would like fade in and out of color, and they were very obvious about it, but it got a lot of press because it was like, yeah, it's actually really cool that this game is so very, very obviously on the nose, drawing attention to itself, showing you the character's internal state. Like, if you're a parkour person, you see the world different than a regular person does. Just like if you're a skateboarder, you see a park or a school or a public space. A public space. Yeah, I said school without. I jokingly said a school before I was like, this literally is the name of the level. You see public space different than other people do. The way in which the ballet style way you move through a world is different than normal. So similarly in this game, this game isn't the first game to do it. BioShock did the exact same thing. Which BioShock did come out, many years before this game. Where it's like, oh, it glistens. But I gotta say, this game does it so much better than other games. And I mean that from a purely, I don't even mean like artistically, like, look, they're so clever. I just mean that the programmers did a real good job of it. Like, with BioShock, you walk into a new area and all you see is just glimmers of light everywhere. And it's very distracting because you're immediately drawn out of the environment and into, I gotta go get those things. This game, they somehow managed to just playtest it so much where it's not so much that it's distracting you and taking you out of the game, and it's not so little that you don't notice it. It's like you are just psychologically noticing things the same way that the character is, which is so cool. And that's not clever or brilliant or smart. That's just, they just put in the effort to playtest it enough where they got it just right.
Yeah.
Good for them.
It's great. My other one is the giraffes and the monkeys were just great. And they were just happy parts to see it, because I love post-apocalyptic things where nature takes back over, and like, what the fuck is a zoo without zookeepers? It's just a place where the animals come from now, and so of course the animals are going to break out and do all those cool things, and you love to see it, and I loved seeing it here. Then my final one is just continuing to gesture vaguely in the direction of Ellie's performance, because it's fucking phenomenal, especially in its back half. Like, when she's dissociating in Salt Lake City, it hurts. And when she's scared in the David things, I'm scared. And when she's raging, like slicing the fuck out of David's face, I'm raging. And her performance went a really long way into making me want to protect Ellie and like take care of her and be her, and it's so good. And because of that, the ending made me so mad that while the credits were still rolling, I googled out of context spoilers to see if Joel died in the second game, because I wanted him to die.
Don't tell me if he does.
I will not, but I needed to know.
Maybe just because I hope he does.
But yeah, those were my memorable moments.
Bruno, do yours first. I don't want to step on yours.
At the beginning of fall, if you go off the path, you can come across what is clearly a child's grave, and little comments on it. And then Ellie mentions Sam, and Joel's like, we're not talking about that. And Ellie's like, I want to talk about it. And Joel's like, you just move on. And it's a really sad scene.
I didn't realize that was an optional scene. I guess I just stumbled into it. That's a really, really good scene.
I didn't take it down word for word, but then afterwards I realized, oh wait, that was a really good scene.
He says, things happen, ... and we move on. Was what he said.
Yeah.
Because she's like, we're not talking about this.
One little thing I love in this game that I don't think I mentioned last week is when you're taking cover, Joel like puts his arm up on the piece of cover that you're behind, and then Ellie takes cover too, but they just animated it in such a perfect way that you can be in cover in the same place, and she just slots perfectly under his arm.
Yes, it's so cool.
And you know, when you're not in fights, sometimes Ellie gets in your way, and I kind of wish there was a button to press to say scoot so that she'd get out of your way more quickly. But yeah, when you're in battle taking cover, you can just be in the same place because of that, and I love it. And since I played it behind right after playing this, I think I'll give a little bit of context about Left Behind. It is half of it is a flashback to Ellie going into an abandoned mall with her friend Riley that she mentioned, and they have a lot of emotions during that adventure, and they kiss, and Ellie's a lesbian, and we love to see it. And,
we do love to see it.
Eventually, they do get bit, and Riley's like, well, we could just kill ourselves and not turn, or we can just be poetic and lose our minds together. And thank goodness they didn't choose to kill themselves. I was about to say that would have been a huge waste, but kind of went to waste anyway, didn't it?
Yeah.
But then the present, quote unquote, half of it is after Joel gets impaled, and she makes sort of a raft thing and drags Joel along with the horse and gets him into a mall and hides him there and goes around trying to find things to help him with. And she finds sutures that she can use. And during that, the people from the university track her and go to try and kill her. The remnants, the people that they didn't get, try and kill her. And last week we talked about how the game never mixes infected and human battles. The interesting thing is Left Behind does in two interesting spots. There's a spot where Ellie emerges from a vent onto this raised platform overlooking the store in the mall, and some guys who are hunting her walk into the store and they're like, careful, I hear infected. And you look down and there are a bunch of infected on your side of the store, so you can throw, it doesn't tell you to do this, but you can throw a brick at them to draw the infected towards them, and then they fight. And then you feel smart because you did that.
That's really cool.
And then later, you're having a big final fight with all of the guys that are coming after you, and it's a really good fight. And with some really great level design. And then near the end, a bunch of infected show up and you hear the guys yelling, oh shit, there's infected. And then you have to deal with both of them at the same time. And it's great. I think it's good that they didn't mix it in the main game, because that would have been just a lot to deal with. But doing it really only one time in the DLC is a neat extra experience.
Yeah. And it makes the DLC worth it. It does a thing that the main game doesn't do, because DLCs that are just a new level are great and all, but you kind of want it to expand, and that's a really cool, easy expansion.
Yeah, that's goated. I have a couple. One is what Bernard said from earlier. Later on, when Sam glossed over this a little bit, but when Tommy and his wife are arguing about whether or not he's going to go and take Ellie, Ellie hears this and says to Joel, what are they arguing about? And she's like, I'll tell you later. And she's like, is it about me? And he's like, we'll talk about it later. And then it becomes very pointed where she's like, okay, later. Because she realizes that everything he says is, we'll talk about it later. And it realize that everything Joel says is either it's in the past, move on, or it's in the future. Which is a really, really cool little psychological thing. That those are his two ways of dealing with things. Is I'm not going to think about it anymore because it already happened, or it's going to happen in the future, so I'm not going to think about it right now. And of course, I'm sure a lot of things are probably future until they become past, right? It's neat. I also think he's not totally wrong when he says things happen, ... and we move on. In many ways, that's the way that you need to be in life a lot of the time, and probably more so when you're in a zombie apocalypse. But there's times when you shouldn't be that way. And Joel can't understand when it's one of those times. Some of the things, I'm just going to skip them. Oh, well, that's fine. I don't want to waste everyone's time with 10 more things. Final thing I'll mention, this game's structure is real neat, and it reminds me a lot of Metal Gear Solid 2, because here's the thing. This game's mechanics are perfectly designed for everything that happens last week. Like, going one room at a time, this rhythm of talking, doing walk and talks, doing puzzles, quote-unquote puzzles, doing scrounging, and then being in these environments that are very meticulously designed levels where you have a certain number of ingredients per area, and it's these specific little battlefields. Like, by the end of the first half of the game is pretty much topped out its mechanics. It's explored them in its entirety. What do you do when your game has explored all of its mechanics all the way, but you only have it through the game? You start doing something different, right? MGS2 is a game that I've always thought very interesting in that people think of Metal Gear Solid, like, oh, those are stealth games, right? They're stealth action games. After about halfway through Metal Gear Solid 2, you at no point do any stealth until, like, the part at the very end where you're in sort of arsenal gear and you're naked. It's like, okay, you did stealth for half the game. Now you're going to do cutscenes and boss battles and special scenarios where you do things like swim a whole bunch underwater and try to not lose your breath, or things where you try to shoot a first-person guided missile in order to blow something up, or mild platforming, where you're outside of something that's been destroyed and you're platforming a bunch, or things where you're shooting using an ice spray to shoot roaches so that they'll go away because you don't like roaches, or things where you're protecting somebody with a sniper rifle. Like, it's all these special little scenarios, and at no point do you do any more actual stealth gameplay. And this game reminds me of that, though to a lesser extent. Like, the first half of the game is the game's core mechanics being explored, and the back half of the game is really like, now you're hunting a deer. Now you're having a battle where it's a boss battle where the goal is to simply sneak up behind him and get him. There's no health meter or any other mechanics. And there are still a few little battles, but they're not particularly interesting. They're not particularly special. They don't have the same game design. The levels are all wide open. Now you're in a hospital and you're blasting things, and also there's a lot less of it. A lot less fighting of zombies. So I just think it's really neat. It's a cool way to do a game. I'm sure those two games I just mentioned, this game and MGS2, aren't the only two games to ever do this. There's probably other games. Feel free to sound off in the Discord if you have other games that have this interesting structural little quirk. But yeah, it's just reminded me a lot of it, and it's dope.
Yeah, it's good. Final review of the game. Good game. Good game.
Real good game. Just not what else is there to say about it?
Yeah, I highly recommend you play it. And I hope that the HBO series is good, but this game is very gamey, as we said. So even if it's a great television show, I still will tell people that they should play
Someone
it.
who has no game console, I could see there being an appeal. But as someone who has a game console and can play the game, I just don't see what a TV show version of this concept is going to add to the conversation.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to me.
I think if you don't play video games, what you want to do is have a friend who plays video games and watch them play The Last of Us.
That's true. Especially because if a game is gamey enough in that kind of way, where it's so clear and concise and concrete with its mechanics and clear in its presentation of them, someone watching the game will get invested in the gameplay parts because it's so clear how the game mechanics work and what the stakes are. Like, remember the first time we ever played God Hand and you were playing and I was watching? Like, I was viscerally invested in what was going on screen. And Bernard did not need to explain the game's mechanics to me. I could tell what was going on. A game that's sufficiently solid in its design will have that effect on somebody, 100%.
Yeah. It's good. You should play it. Like, I can see a world where the HBO series is a great adaptation of this story and these characters and this world, and it is great. And I still think that the game would have enough unique things to say that even if you get all of the same plot information, that you should play the game, because this game is so incredibly gamey.
I will say one problem that I immediately saw with the upcoming HBO series is Pedro Pascal is too much of a sweetie to be Joel.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Pedro Pascal plays Joel. Great, he's awesome, but I agree, he's miscast.
I say that jokingly because he's a great actor. I'm sure he'll do great as Joel, but I like Pedro Pascal.
Yeah. I can't imagine him playing Joel, but I'm sure he will, because that's what acting is. But I agree.
Yeah, if Pedro makes me upset at him, it's gonna give me a lot of weird emotions. But anywho, thanks everyone for listening to these episodes. Hypothetically, because now we've recorded both of them and I've edited 0 of them, but supposedly they'll come out at some point. So thank you for listening to these. They have been fun. Our next unlockable is Final Fantasy 13, the whole trilogy. So we'll be on those for a hot minute, like we were on .hack. So
which of them have been funded already?
Just the first one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Probably gonna be a game that is also good, but in much less straightforward ways.
We could probably talk as far as like take the amount of time we've been talking about this game and take the amount of hours that the game takes to play The Last of Us and divide by amount of hours of podcast. Let's say about 3. So 12-hour game divided by 3 hours of podcast. That's around 4. That's 4 hour. That's a 4-to-1 ratio. Final Fantasy 13 is a significantly worse game than The Last of Us, but I bet it has a higher ratio. Yeah. Or an even stronger ratio of talking per game hours.
Yes. But as for what our next shortcast will be, I do not know. I'm sure it will be something cool. I haven't even thought of it. Like, we're not back 2-3 years now when we were starting the Ko-Fi. I was like, okay, I know we're going to do Halo first and we're going to do Last of Us second. And that's as far as I ever got with Shortcast. So who knows what we'll get to. I'm sure it will be something good.
Questions channel.
Yeah. But that'll do it for the week. If you want to check us out and help us keep the lights on and stuff like that, you can mosey on over to www.rpgbook.club, where you can donate to unlock these shortcast and longcast episodes, as well as vote on the games that we play in our main series, as well as get 1 month early access to the Book Club no Kuseki series, which is the longest of longcasts. It is basically a long cast that'll keep happening for the next 5 years of our life.
An indefinite cast.
Yes. But forever cast. But for RPG Book Club, I can't believe I forgot the fucking name of our podcast. For RPG Book Club, I have been Sam Allman.
Wait, we're recording a podcast?
I am sorry for coughing all the time during the podcast. I am sick. But I'm David Bernard Hauk.
And I can't think of a cute or funny thing to say. I have to piss and then I have to take a nap.
Scoot.
I'm from Texas.